Hi, everybody, and welcome to Human Performance Podcast with Basti and me, Adrian. Today, we have a pretty cool topic, which is something that we do every day and we've been doing pretty much our entire life, which is performance and longevity, and how we deal with that, how we coach people, how we recommend people to do different things to improve their longevity and their performance. So, Basti, would you mind to start kind of talking? What do you do, to coach people or in your daily life for performance and longevity?
Okay, so hi Adrian. Hi everybody. I think before we speak about longevity, we need to clarify some of the important definitions in this case. So longevity in essence is your lifespan, how long you're living, and like Adrian mentioned, I think what we should be doing is not only talk about longevity, but also about your ability to still perform stuff, whether you're an athlete or like a layman person. And with that, I think there's two main things that I like to talk about. One is the health span. And if we speak about health span, the difference to lifespan, the other one is the lifespan is just the total amount of years that you're living. The health span is the total amount of years that you're living, but in a really good health setting. And I think what we need to understand and what we see kind of all over the world where countries are getting richer is that the lifespan is kind of increasing drastically, and that the health span, on the other hand, is actually shrinking, or not. I think in some countries it's shrinking, but in most others it has been staying the same for decades now.
Yeah.
And I think one of the main things that we should be focusing on is what's the goal, or the goal is to maintain a really long health span within your lifespan. I think Greg Glassman, the founder of CrossFit, like his idea of defining health is super smart and intelligent. He kind of referred back to his definition of fitness. So like, what is your ability to do work over a lot of different time domains and settings and modalities? And the definition of health is kind of how long are you able to extend that over the amount of your lifetime. And what we would like to see, or what I think is a really good definition of that, is that you have a very high work capacity. So you can still lift heavy, you can still run for quite a while, or go and ski, uh, squat your grandchildren up and down whenever you want it, even when you're 85 or 90. So I think these are the kind of the main definitions. And I think the key question is, what can we do to to influence our health span and to increase the health span. And so what we are doing mainly in the gym is, with 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 a group of older people training in the gym as well. They're like 60 plus, and I think, speaking about exercise I think is one of the main drivers of health span. I think oftentimes it depends on the intensity of the exercise, but I still, it's not super clear right now at the moment whether it's smart to push really hard all the time, or whether it's smart to have a little bit lower intensities, and then in some variations add in some higher intensities. But I think like one of the key takeaways is that exercise is, I think, one of the prerequisites to having a long a long health span. And I think within the exercise category, we could talk about a lot of different things. I think what people sometimes get wrong is, I think it's not the people that are not the hardest working athletes that live the longest and the lives with the longest health span, but it's actually, if you look at people that have very long lives in some region in Asia, in Japan, for example, or where you see a lot of centenarian people, like people that are 100 years or older, and they still have a good health, that these people have not been used to exercise super hard all the time, but they were doing like a lot of the daily work they were doing, and some, I would more say, like lower grade intensities. But I think, to the contrary, what we're seeing in the CrossFit world as well is that we see great results even with old people, that started training at 60, and with 75 they are probably fitter than they have been with 35. So I think the question is not super well answered, and we know too little about the body, but I think exercise is just one of the main things that we can do to increase our health span.
Yeah, for sure. I think the the main contradiction, I think, the contradiction between performance and longevity. I think performance, if you take performance as competing in a sport, you're always going to push your body to the limit, and everything that you push to the limit is going to go at some point a little bit above. So you are going to maybe get some injuries. You're going to put your body to over too much stress, even if it's the good kind of stress, which is training and these kind of things. So if you keep trying, if you keep doing this kind of performance for longer, when you are 20, you can do pretty much whatever you want. Your body can take pretty much everything. But if you keep putting your body through that kind of stress and that pressure and that intensity, obviously that's going to be detrimental for your longevity. And I see that with a lot of the athletes that we work at Go Primal. Some of the athletes, most of them are 21, 22, 26 max. They train from the less to 8 hours per day, 2 or 3 sessions, super high intensity. They put from 2 3 hours of cardio per week at least to 10 12 hours of cardio per week depending on the season. Same with the strength, same with volume. Like, you know easily they can get to do 200 toast chest to bar per week, 5 to 900 double unders. That's too much volume for the joints, for the tissues, and everything. But at some point they are going to stop doing that competition. But what we want them, and what we work a lot with a lot of athletes that they were professional athletes before at Go Primal, is that how can they continue working out, how they should continue performing, not at that level, drop a little bit the intensity, the volume, the hours, everything, and what you have to do to keep performing. But also even the athletes that are competing, you're putting your body under that stress. What you have to do around that stress to minimize the intensity to that your body is suffering. And I think a lot of young athletes don't realize that if they take proper care of their body, even that they don't feel it, because they can just sleep 3 4 hours, next day go to the gym, even drink a beer after training, and that's fine. But that's going to be detrimental in the long term. The longevity of their career is going to be lower or shorter than if they were taking care of everything. And you can take that into every stage of performance. And performance means also the guy is 60 years old, people that is training with you. You want them to train for 20 more years, not for only 5, right? So all those things that they need to do around, I think it's pretty important. And I think high
So
performance and
yeah.
longevity should go together or could go together.
So I totally agree. I think people could be like way fitter in their old days when they would do proper training. And what I'm doing and what I would recommend doing almost with everybody, and I think that's what we're seeing with the really good CrossFit athletes as well, is they have a kind of like a concurrent training approach where they still do a lot of aerobic work. They do a lot of
Yeah,
strength work. So it's not that crazy. I go all out in
yeah,
workouts every day. They do a lot of dedicated aerobic work. They do a lot of dedicated strength work where it's like more slow lifts and technical lifts. And then in between, they're still doing like crazy amounts of 2 to 4 workouts every day.
yeah,
But I think one of the main focuses they're still having is that build up of the aerobic system and the building up of strength. And what I'm trying to do with my older people is we're doing more mobility work. I'm doing a lot of balance work. I think there's some really good like neuroscientific evidence that balance work is not only helping you preventing falls, but on the other hand also helping to keep a good working memory. So I think there's that stuff that I'm doing. A lot of them are fairly stiff. So we do mobility work and strength work focused on mobility. We do a lot of stability work as well. Like think about easy planking, side planking. just holding tension. And then we're doing a lot of like simple, not very technical strength work to increase muscle mass and bone
Mhm.
density. And the other thing that we're trying to do is simple movements and like longer durations where we do more aerobic work with them. I think very rarely do we push into the super high intensities. You need to go all out now with
Yeah.
whatever it might be, kettlebell swings and thrusters. Um, like for me, the benefit of that compared to the risk of getting hurt is oftentimes not really
Yeah.
in favor of pushing too hard with the intensity.
I agree. I like to a lot to work on MOM style, and recommend people to work on MOM. Like the typical person that comes, new person. I have a few friends that they know about CrossFit that they never really train. They want to try, and then I have another friend that he's another coach, and he's always like, yeah, you go, and then we're gonna go, 15 minutes all in, blah blah blah, and I'm like, why you should do that? It's a new person, doesn't know anything about how his body work, and you're going to push this guy, which is going to go in because he wants to do it for 15 minutes. He's going to be extremely tired. Next day, probably is going to have a lot of injuries and pains. Instead of saying, okay, every minute on the minute, you do 6 or 7 reps, you have 20, 15, 30 seconds to rest. You need the rest to be able to perform in the right way. Do that for 25 minutes, for 45 minutes, 35, whatever it is, instead of just trying to go the 1, 2, 3, go, go, go. That used to be the CrossFit way of doing things. But like everything, when you start doing something, you don't know how things should be performed in a better way. So I think CrossFit has evolved a little bit.
Yeah, you know what? I think also the CrossFit way I love CrossFit. I think it's the best training methodology out there. But I think what we need to be conscious of is very often we work with people that don't have athletic backgrounds, and their body tissues, their all their body systems are not working up to a level that's kind of a prerequisite to do the stuff well.
Yeah,
And uh, I think what you're seeing is if you have a good coach, he's able to scale these things down so that you take a benefit without having the risk of injuring yourself. But I think you need to be very mindful of how you add new people to your gym, how do you integrate them so that they actually see long-term benefits and don't
yeah,
end up with orthopedic injuries.
yeah,
But
yeah.
I think it's more about, are you as a coach able to scale workouts properly and make them right for all different levels, all different
Yeah,
ages? And it's pretty tough. It sounds easy, but if you have a group of 12 to 15 people making the let's almost split-second decisions of, hey, you're going to do this and this is going to
yeah,
help you, and it's not crap, I think that's actually fairly hard, and
yeah.
it
True.
requires a good level and understanding
What I
of
talk with a lot of coaches, box owners. I've talked with hundreds of them all around the world, and a lot of them, what they tell me is that they have a really hard time to scale down exercises to young people, especially guys, because of the pride and the ego of, okay, I'm strong and I can lift this. Yes, but in which way you are lifting what you are doing, you have to do it for 30 times. So the first 5 times is going to be fine. You will probably lift 30 before anybody else, but you probably are going to hurt yourself at some point. And I can see that a lot of the times at the gym that I go, or any or some other gyms, that I can see a lot of, especially strong guys, that they are lifting in a really bad way. But when the coach tries to scale down, they get mad. And a lot of coaches told me, if we push them too much, these people go to the other box, because in the other box they let them do whatever. They just have open box. They go there. They do whatever. And I think this is probably the reason why CrossFit has a little bit of bad fame in some places, because they see those people doing pretty crazy stuff in a bad way, and that's definitely not good for performance in the long term, and it's definitely not good for longevity, because
Oh, I agree. Like compromising your joints and
exactly, like
getting injured is
100%. I'm 40 and I have pretty much no pain in anywhere. And I train with people that are 25, 26, and they are completely fucked. Like they are always like going to the physio, to this. I have my knee, whatever has something, my shoulder, something else. And I'm like, well, not really surprised, to be honest. And you've been training for what, for 3 4 years maybe. um, so that's I think the problem with performance and longevity.
But I think it's also the problem of, I think a lot of people in the CrossFit world, they don't know how to like ramp up the volume, how to progressively engage into doing more as athletes. They just jump into the program where they have 2 sessions a day. They've been
Yeah,
training 4 hours a week, now suddenly training 12 hours. I think it's just like a total overload of the tissue. The tissue is not used to the stress. I think that's one component. I think the second component that I see all the time is even I would say it's the middle to upper class athlete, not the elite athletes. They oftentimes don't have great technique in a lot of the movements, and they're not working on it consistently. And I think even if your technique is only a little suboptimal, or maybe even more than suboptimal, with high volume, the risk of getting hurt is just so much higher compared to having great technique, very efficient ways of moving. It reduces your risk of injury dramatically. And so I think it's the quick ramp up of volume that's very detrimental. And it's also very often it's not the lack of technical expertise that's leading to issues compared with the, like, in relation to the volume that they're doing.
yeah, 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 for sure. So I have here a few points um, about how to improve performance and longevity. Nutrition, sleep, stress. I think those 3 points, nobody can say that they are not important for you. But I know a lot of athletes, medium, the normally the medium to, how did you call it? Medium to
Yeah,
high
to upper class, yeah,
upper
whatever.
class.
I think
Yeah, maybe it's not upper
it's
class.
not the elite athlete.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, upper class is like the
Yeah, but the elite athletes, I think it's funny when sometimes I hear some of the elite athletes doing what they are doing, or knowing what they are doing, because they normally say other things that when they are doing. Some of them they do keto fasting, and then I've seen them somewhere else eating burgers or whatever. Um,
yeah.
but in general, the nutrition, sleep, and stress management. These three parameters are, we could have, instead of a stress, maybe we can have health, mental health. I think is there is one aspect of mental health, which is the stress, but then the other one is the psychological part of being an athlete. A lot of young people, but not only young people, because I know people from my age as well, that their work and everything is already done, so they are focusing quite a lot on competing. um, so they have a stress, they have mental issues of, because of this, because of wanting to perform, because they want to be better than their colleague or whatever. I think it's a good point. I don't know about in Austria, but in Spain I know a lot of people that are going to these sports psychologists. I don't know if it's normal, if you ever heard
Hmm.
about, but I know 20 people, 20, 30 people that they go to these, not to one specific, to a lot of sports psychologists. They just talk about, how they feel, why they feel they are not performing well, and then they are helping them. So it's funny. I will only thought that that was something for the elite athletes, football players, basketball players, things like that. But I guess everybody has those issues. But in terms of nutrition, for
Yeah.
example, let's start with nutrition. Do you recommend any kind of diet, way of eating, not eating something, eating something?
So for me, the only thing that I really recommend is trying to limit the intake of processed foods. I think
Uh,
that's the key thing that I'm trying to do. And I'm not eating like super paleo anymore. I ate pretty fair paleo for almost like a year with no kind of cheat days. Um, I think back in the days I ate a lot of pasta and other stuff as well. But I think I realized a fairly good improvement in in getting rid of a lot of the highly processed carbohydrates and just eating real food. I think that's the main thing. I'm not focusing so much on ketosis or keto
mm,
diet. I'm not vegan. I'm not saying only meat is good. I think you can And I think humans are made for that, like eating kind of like a broad range of things to stay healthy.
Yeah.
That's I think that's the first layer of thinking about it. It's like, hey, that's the stuff that we want to eat, and depending on your goals as an athlete or a person in general, I think we can tweak that a little bit more. I think for some people it totally makes sense to focus on like macronutrient restrictions, like you're eating less carbohydrates, you're going more into the direction of keto. If
Mhm.
you're doing bodybuilding, maybe you want to ramp up your carbohydrates. But even that, I think for some people being on keto works great if they want to lose weight. For some people it doesn't work that great, but for a lot of it, for a lot of them, I think it does. I think that's one way of addressing it. For some people, we could say we do a little bit of fasting to improve overall health.
Mhm.
So I think there's a bunch of ways to frame it, but I think for me the most important is don't eat too much refined food, or try
Yeah.
to like don't eat it. And I think also cutting down on added sugar. It's
Yeah,
I
for
see it
sure.
with my kids all the time. It's crazy how much sugar is
Yeah, yeah,
in
everywhere.
everything.
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you a
Yeah,
funny story. So I always recommend not to eat any highly processed carbs, which is including sugar, obviously. And I never eat sugar other than fruit. In my house, we don't have any candies or anything. Um, Mainly because if there is anything, either my wife or me will eat it automatically. Automatically, like if I buy Nutella, whatever, it's like one day it's gone. Probably because I never have it. So when I have it, so I have some
do
peanut
you know
butter.
John Berardi? Do you
No,
know
what is
John
that?
Berardi,
No,
the founder of Precision Nutrition?
no.
That's his rule number one is, if you have it at home, you will eat it. And I think
Yeah,
it's so true. It's
it
even
is
with the
true.
kids, they don't ask for stuff. If I say for 3 or 4 days, hey, there's nothing at home,
Yeah,
they go like,
exactly.
okay, there's nothing at home. If there's
Yeah,
always something at home, they just constantly
they
eat it.
will. What we have as a treat is dates, peanut butter, and 80%, 85% chocolate with very little amount of sugar. And we have a small amount, and that's enough. You normally need that kind of boost
It's
of
just like the
calories or fat or whatever it is. Yeah. Um, so that's what we were using. A couple of weeks ago, it was the birthday of one of my friends, so I went to his house and I stayed. Was over another town, so I stayed there for the weekend. So he bought, other than when you start looking at what they are eating, they were eating chips and candies. It was like the normal way of eating. So he bought extra candies, those candies that are like super sweet and sour, the ones that I was eating when I was a kid. So weekend was away, so I was like, yeah, fuck it, I'm gonna eat them. So obviously I ate them all. When I mean all, is
well,
like all for four people. I ate them all by myself because everybody was drinking and I don't drink, so I was just like eating. Um, I did not sleep that night, not a single minute. And it's not because I didn't feel it; it's because my watch tracked 0 hours of sleep. Like it tracked like I wasn't sleeping. Normally it says, 45 minutes awake or 2 hours of light sleep or whatever it is, like a bad night. Uh, that night, zero hours,
it's
minutes of
crazy.
sleep. And that was all the sugar that I took from 6 o'clock to 12 o'clock, more or less, that I was constantly eating this
Yeah.
kind of crap. So that means how much bad nutrition can impact your rest, your recovery, your performance, your longevity. And having a little bit, obviously, having a little bit every day is not bad. Um, but I know very little people that is able to control that very little, and they think is very little, and it's not.
And then it's the whole pack of chocolate is gone. That's not very
Yeah,
little anymore.
yeah, yeah,
But I
exactly.
totally agree. You know what? I think people go way over the top with saying, "Hey, sugar, it's so bad, and you can't eat it." I'm like, okay, you know what I think? I think up to a point it doesn't matter. But I think the point is, it's like, I don't know the numbers about it anyway. But for me, let's say you're smoking half a cigarette every day, probably the risk of like the negative effects are still very, very small compared to smoking a pack a day for over a decade. And I think it's the same with the sugary stuff.
Yeah.
most people with cigarettes, they just can't smoke half a cigarette a day. When they start, they need to smoke 10,
Yeah.
15, 20, 30 cigarettes. It's the same with sugar. I think once you're in that loop of
Yeah.
addiction, it's so hard to break it. And most people are just addicted to sugar. And
It
then we're
is
not speaking
addictive.
about having,
It is
then we're not
addictive.
speaking
Like,
about 5 to 10 grams of sugar. We are speaking about like 50 to 100 grams to 200 grams of sugar
yeah.
every day. And that's a nightmare.
Yeah. One thing that I have some issues, not issues, but problems explaining and making people understand, especially the ones that are training a little bit more than usual, but also the ones that they train and they want to have some kind of okay diet, but they don't really understand how bad the processed carbs are, and especially in Spain, bread and pasta. It's like they still believe that it's a good meal when they have, plain white bread with, Parma ham or something like that. Something that is being always considered light, for
Mm.
whatever light means to them. And they are like, oh yeah, I'm having a good diet now because I'm only having this sandwich and then another sandwich. And I'm like, dude, you're eating already 3 sandwiches per day. What is the good diet? Like, what was bad diet for you? But then for them, the bad diet is deep fry, which is bad, obviously, sugar, candies, and these kind of things. That's bad, which, yes. But then they don't realize that eating a lot of highly processed carbs like pasta and bread, the white one, there are a lot of good bread. The,
Yeah.
the bread is not bad; it's the white flour that is bad. Um, and especially the ones that are training, because then they are, yeah, but if I don't eat this, I'm completely out of energy the entire day. And I don't eat them. I'm not low energy in any way, but I change it for something else. But I don't know if you have the same issue, but it's hard for people to understand, like, those kind of carbs are bad for you.
You know what I think is so super hard about it? It's the delayed feedback process. I think people learn really quickly if they get immediate feedback. I'll give an example. If a kid touches the stove and it burns his fingers, he's not going to touch the stove anymore.
Yeah,
I think if you touch the stove and you would get the burn a year later, it would be very hard for you not to touch the stove if it's a
true.
nice feeling of touching the stove. And I think it's the same with the processed carbs. Um, I think some of the detrimental effects are like we really see them over decades
Yeah,
coming in. Like at 20, you're maybe a little insulin resistant. At 30, okay, you have hyperinsulinemia. At 40, maybe you're developing upper body obesity, but it's a gradual shift
yeah,
towards
yeah,
more
yeah.
sickness than health, and it's so hard for people to understand that. But I think what works really well, but nobody can afford and do it on a regular basis, if you're not diabetic, is like having a blood glucose monitor that's like giving you real-time measures
Yeah, my
like
wife
all
has it.
day, every day. Yeah,
She bought
really?
it. Yeah, she bought it
Yeah,
because she's really bad with candies, and that's why
yeah,
there is nothing
but
else
you
on.
know, I think that's really good. If you suddenly see whenever you eat that stuff, you
True.
get it like, ah, damn, it's really high. It's like you're driving well, like 60 or 70, and then I don't know if you have it in Spain, but you have these weird things that tell you the
Yeah,
speed. I mean, you can see the speed on in your car, but it tells you
yeah,
the speed and it makes the smiley or it makes the
yeah,
other one. You're immediately slowing down. I know almost nobody that's not slowing down. And it's like the same thing with the GCM, with the blood
yeah,
glucose monitor. If you look at it, you go like, damn, that's really high.
yeah.
You're more likely to not eat that shit.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah,
that's
yeah. But you need to. I think that's not for regular people. You need to be really concerned about it, and
exactly.
so it's difficult for the average Joe to do it. The delay effect that you were mentioning, that's a really good example. And the reason why I stopped eating precisely white flour was because when I started doing CrossFit and everything was way more intense than my other sport that I was doing before. I was having, my neck and my back was constantly stiff, and I was getting these, I don't know how you call that in English, torticolis or something like that. Just
Mhm.
getting a lot of contracture in my neck, traps, and also my dorsal. And I changed, everything, try everything. Well, like every week, I was getting that. I was like, what's happening? Somebody told me that, oh, I had this in my neck, and then I stopped eating pasta, bread, and I was like, well, I'm going to look into this. I look into that, and then I started to see the inflammation the white flour, the wheat, basically processed wheat, makes into your intestine, which is related to the cervicals and the muscles around. So I was like, I'm gonna give it a try. Like I was always eating pasta and these things, but I could have changed it for rice or some other stuff that wasn't less inflammatory. 1 week. It took me 1 week for not having any more pain anymore. Like that's pretty much automatic. So from that day, I was like, I'm not having any more. And then a few months later, I had a pizza, had something else. If I have like one pizza, one sandwich with normal white bread, it's kind of okay. If I have two, one day after the other, automatically the third day, I'm having problems with my neck and back and inflammation and things like that.
Yeah, but I think this is a concept that I really like about the neuroathletic approach to training is the like they call it neurometrics pain theory, or the neurometrics. Yeah, the threat neuromatrix is the word, and what they're saying, there's a lot of different issues that could cause threat, and threat will lead to some kind of output. It might be, for some people they get joint pain, for some people they get stiffness in their neck, and I think what's happening is you're taking threat out of your body. um, this might be, we talked about stress might be a threat for you. It might be you're financially unstable, that might be a threat for you. You might be having bad work, that might be a threat for you. It also might be bad movement, and that the joints are not moving congruently, that might be a threat for you, even though there's no like current damage, but that might be a threat for you. And I think it's everybody reacts differently to the threat. Some people develop stuff over here, some people develop stuff somewhere else, but it's like getting rid of a threat. And sometimes you see, and it's only very little. I mean, the intervention seems so small, you go like how the heck could it affect my neck? Well, if it's the right thing that you're doing, the threat within this thing might be very high, you're reducing the threat, and suddenly your well-being goes up dramatically. I think that's super interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Um, just because I think we try to do this podcast between 30 to 45 minutes max. I think we are already in 28 minutes, something like that. Um, there is not that much left that we wanted to talk. Um, there is some points maybe related to stress and sleep. I think in the sport industry, caffeine is really well used for, you know, pre-workout to improve your performance, and it has a lot of cognitive benefits for sure, also for working. But I think it also has a lot of negative effects in the way that you can rest, the way that you can sleep. And obviously, I'm not talking about having one or two coffees per day early in the morning. That has a lot of antioxidant benefits amongst the cognitive benefits. But I know a lot of people that they are easily drinking, 3 or 4 energy drinks per day. One because one to start, then the second one to the first session, the third one after the second before the second session, and the third one because they are thirsty. Um, I don't know if you, for example, have any energy drink in your box. If you see people
Not
taking
really.
quite often, not really. You have the green tea,
It's
the
called
green
All
tea.
I Need. It's not. Yeah, it's not really an energy drink.
No, it's just like a
It
green tea
has. It
with
has. Yes, it's with some other herbs in it,
yeah,
and yeah, I
yeah,
think a
yeah,
very minor amount of sugar compared to other drinks.
yeah, yeah,
But I think it's not really an energy. It's not one of these crazy caffeine bombs that you
yeah, yeah.
throw into yourself and then you're like, oh,
Yeah,
I'm
like
ready to train.
some of them have like the amount of 4 coffees, four
Yeah,
to
it's
five
crazy.
coffees. I think it's quite a lot. I have coffee every day. I have 2 to 3 coffees. Never after 3, 4.
Three, four.
After never after 4 o'clock. Almost never.
But that
Uh,
said, like, do you go like, are you the typical Spain and go to bed at 11 or 12, or do you go to bed earlier?
no, no, I'm going at 10 o'clock. We are already gone.
Okay,
Yeah,
but I
yeah.
mean,
I'm
if you
not the
do this, I think
typical.
it's very Spain.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not. But normally people here go to bed at 12 or 1. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. I think if you go back to bed at 12, you can maybe have a coffee
Sure.
at 4 or 5. I think if you go to bed at 9 and 10, if you have a coffee at 5, you probably will
Yeah.
sacrifice some of the good sleep that you might be having.
Even if you don't realize that you are not sleeping, you
but
can
that said,
sleep.
I think that's also very interesting is the genetical differences in people, and a lot of it has to do. There's an enzyme in the liver that's degrading coffee, and some people have a very fast form of it, and some people have a slow form of it. So the people that have a very fast form, they have actually very little issues and can enjoy the benefits of coffee. But I know people that get horrifically sympathetically overactivated. I had people that had blood in their stool from drinking coffee because they drank so much of it, from being like insomniac. I think it's crazy if you go to that like extremes to of having 6+ coffees every day. There might be detrimental effects. And that, you know what the other thing is, I regularly do a coffee detox where I'm not drinking coffee for a week or 2 weeks, because I think also in the exercise world, it's not smart if you use the same drug over and over again, because you're going to, every day, because you're going to build up some resistance against it. And even in there, I think it's worth like taking it out for a while and then reintroducing it back, maybe before you have a competition in these kind of settings, but not use it as a daily boost for your energy. I think then there's something wrong with your metabolism already.
Yeah, for sure. I normally have pretty much 90% of the days I have 2 coffees, one in the morning and then one around 11 or 12 with my second meal. Feel absolutely nothing. Like I don't really feel any, boost of whatever. Normally I have half of an energy drink on Saturdays because I train in the morning with a bunch of super strong guys. So I need that kick. I don't really feel much, but it's just like I think it's like a tradition to be with people, and
it's the ritual that you have in your head.
And at the end it's just half of an energy drink. It's not even one. Just because I don't want to have a full one, I don't just drink a little bit. The fizziness of the drink is also good for my stomach for some reason. I don't really know why. I think it's good. I'm also taking nootropics. The Go Primal nootropic. I don't know if are you taking it regularly or every second month or something like that?
Very irregular. The nootropics I'm taking very irregularly. I'm really very often. I'm taking the omega-3 on a daily basis. I have a pretty strong vitamin D regime over
How many do you take?
The winter. That depends. I mostly do it like a little bit cyclical, so I'm not going to take the same dose every day.
Every day,
No, I'm not going to take the same dose every day. I have fluctuations in dosages, but from 5 to 10,000 units, depending on where I am.
Per day, more or less per day.
Yeah, per day.
Yeah. I think
then there's some days where I level it off.
Okay. Yeah, normally take a few more.
Okay. And for omega-3, I'm trying to get at least 3 grams.
3 grams.
I'm taking 4 to mostly 4 pills.
4 pills per day. Normally I just take 2. But probably I think it's better to be a little bit more consistent than having 4 one day, 2 the next day, or forget the next day.
Yeah. Let me say this. I agree, but my cyclical approach is not being random. So I'm not having super random spikes. It's more like there's a system behind it that it's not. I'm taking 7 now. I'm not taking them for a week. Then I'm going to take 10. It's a very structured way so that I have a good average dose over a couple of months.
That's a good way. I think magnesium with zinc and D3 and omega-3. There is no other nutrition combo that can be better for performance and longevity in general. And the nootropic is something that I take if I have a lot of work, and I don't take it every day. It's more like a performance orientated consumption. But I think it's a good way of not relying on caffeine or any kind of stimulant. For training or even for working. But Basti,
speak to you soon.
Thanks a lot for everything. Talk to you soon.
Bye. See you.
Bye.